She said she was going to be late. Yes.
Big win.
You did good. I mean, I just told you. It's okay. You're not the only one who thought it was just a fail.
So I sent Maria a note after the number get into the meeting.
There's no number.
What you need? For Rachel?
We spread out like this.
She's in the back.
Back by the coffee.
She's getting her coffee.
Back by the coffee. Yeah. She rode a different bike than she did.
I'm so out of shape. Come on, go
It was the bike.
Grandkids are
Oh, that actually does.
We almost went to Phoenix for Mother's Day.
Oh, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
My youngest brother was
Build
up
up.
last week. He went to San Diego with his daughter to visit my nephew up there in their little boy in the expectant Bahamas.
Came to your house.
Oh, he lives in Scottsdale. We ready to go? We are recording?
Yeah.
Get like a drink and happy. It's just
Nice.
Are we going to use the mics?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the special meeting for May 12th, 2020. May I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Adams?
Mayor Rick Mueller.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rachel Gray. Present. Councilmember William.
Present.
Councilmember Gwen Calhoun.
Present.
Councilmember Sarah Pacheco. Councilmember Carolyn Humphrey.
Present.
Councilmember Christine Wolf.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. I understand Ms. Pacheco is on her way up.
Yes.
May I have a motion for the acceptance of the agenda, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, item 1?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the agenda for the special city council meeting of May 12th, 2020 be approved as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion, corrections, additions? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. Those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? It's 6-4, 1 absent. So we'll go on with item number 2. Ms. Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Resolution 2020-018, amendments to the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation Plan be approved.
And I have a second
Second.
from Ms. Humphrey. Thank you.
Would you like a presentation?
May we have a presentation, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the current Citizen Participation Plan was adopted when the city first became an entitlement community back in 2014. This is a required document that establishes ground rules on how we adopt, amend, and report on our CDBG plans and activities. The additional language pertains to the substantial amendments made during a declared emergency. It's a necessary step to secure the CARES Act funding and expedite our response. The minimum 5-day comment period and the use of virtual public hearings described in the amendments is consistent with HUD's guidance and our COVID-19 waiver that we submitted to pursue this course of action. The proposed amendments were posted on the city's website for a 5-day public comment period ending yesterday. No feedback was received. Staff is recommending that the City Council adopt Resolution 2020-18 as presented.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Questions from the council? Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It passes 6-0 and one absent. We now go up to item number 3. Mr. Benning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2020-019, submission of substantial amendments to the Community Development Block Grant 5-year Consolidated Plan and Program Year 2019 Annual Action Plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. McLaughlin, may we have your staff report, please?
Members of council, again, this is authorization to submit the proposed amendments to the 5-year consolidated plan and 2019 annual action plan program, the $159,897 in CDBG coronavirus funding the city received through the CARES Act. The amendments that were placed in the public record for a 5-day comment period are consistent with your most recent guidance on allocating $120,000 towards an emergency small business grant assistance program and $39,897 towards public service activities that will assist community members impacted by COVID-19. We're ready to proceed on both fronts. The application forms for the business grant have been finalized in accordance with your input with a one-page flyer that bullets out the basic terms of the grant, eligible costs, funding available, and how to apply. We've already been contacted by several businesses and will continue using all available channels to get the word out. Additionally, we've amended the subrecipient agreement with United Way to cover the revised amount and compress the time frame down to 4 months. Administrative fee in the agreement was lowered to $2,000, which is acceptable to United Way. The agreement provides for monthly performance and financial reporting so we can track progress and expenditures relative to the approved budget. 80% of the funds will be used for food, rent, and utility assistance to help cover the gap. Just under $6,000 will be equally split to provide employment assistance, mental health, counseling services, and hotel motel vouchers for homeless individuals if the emergency shelter reaches capacity or quarantine purposes. An important point to reiterate is that no individual will be receiving a check. Payments will be made directly to service providers. Included in the packet is a summary of the amendments by page number to help you find the highlighted sections in the document. No public comments were provided during the 5-day period, which closed yesterday. Staff is recommending adoption of Resolution 2019, authorizing staff to submit the amendments to HUD, which is done electronically using our IDAS system. While we know that we'll be first in line with HUD, which will expedite our review, we don't yet have a definitive date for the grant agreement. Right now, we're estimating by the end of the month, and we'll certainly keep you posted as soon as we receive it. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
And we'll do our best to make sure it's as soon as possible, right?
Yes, we will send daily reminders if we have to.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Mr. King, did you have something you want to say before we discuss this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor and Council. As the Vice President of United Way Board of Directors, I am going to recuse myself from this. So, thank y'all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benning. Any questions or any questions for Mr. McLaughlin while he's here?
Just comment.
Okay, comments, discussion? I think the Mayor Pro Tem beat you there.
No, I just want to say thank you to the staff and council for working as fast as possible to get this accomplished and for council to really think this through and discuss it. I appreciate when we do that, and I think this will be very helpful to our community. So I'm glad to have this option available.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I actually echo the Mayor Pro Tem's words, but also I have a question. You use the word several. How many is several?
Several.
When you several businesses have already contacted you. How many is several?
I would say probably 10.
That's more than several.
Oh, so we've seen probably, I mean, between email and phone calls. It's
For the record, this is Tony Booth.
So roughly, I'd say between 8 to 10, but phone calls. In some cases, we've been contacted by bookkeepers representing 2 or 3 businesses.
Understood. I was just wondering what, at this point, before we've been past it, what the need is anticipated to be, and we haven't even really pushed it out. Okay, but thank you.
And we actually completed probably 80% of their first application this afternoon.
Wow.
So that's between noon and now, so within 3 hours.
Thank you. It's definitely something that's needed in our community. You guys for working so quickly. Awesome.
Anybody else have questions for Matt? Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Appreciate your work. I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? 6-4, and one abstain. Okay, so that concludes. If there's any other discussion on the special council meeting, seeing none, I'll close the special council meeting. We'll now move to the work session. Close the special council meeting. Move to the work session. Open work session for May 12th. And item number 1 is the May 14th council meeting agenda. And just going through this, roll call, invocation, pledge, awards and presentations. I'm not sure we have any of those. We have a consent agenda with 3 items on it. Does staff have, or council have any questions or need to discuss any of the consent agenda items? Okay. Seeing nothing, we'll move on to item number 3, which is the resolution to accept the grant administration for Office of Federal Grants. And that is, hang on a second. Okay, this is the item number 3 will be for grants, and Mrs. Papa-Trefon, would you please?
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, members of council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present the following resolution. 911 services allow callers to dial a standard nationwide number to reach emergency services. Callers are specifically routed to the nearest public safety answering point, or PSAP, a standalone network. Each PSAP incurs monthly fees for uninterrupted service and continued equipment, maintenance, replacement, and software updates. In my role as the Cochise County 911 System Administrator, we have secured a grant in the amount of $447,624. This funding has been allocated to the Cochise 911 System by the Department of Administration State 911 Program Office. Cover the costs associated with monthly fees, equipment maintenance, replacement, and software updates for each PSAP in Cochise County. This award covers the period fiscal year July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021.
Thank you, Mrs. Papa-Trefon. Any questions for Papa-Trefon? Okay, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you Thursday.
Thanks.
Okay, item number 4. Mr. Boone, we're going to talk to us about what used to be the JLUIS, now the Joint Resolution Utility Study. Mr. Boone.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I present to you a resolution concerning Fort Huachuca's Joint Resource Utilization Study. You may be familiar with the older name Joint Land Use Study, or JLUIS. With your approval and final approval from the Office of Economic Adjustment, we will move forward with the study. Fort Huachuca requested an updated study in 2018 through the Installation Management Command, went through the Pentagon and bounced over to Office of Economic Adjustment, who reached out to us because of our previous work on OEA grants. And we've been working on this for about the last 2 years. So as background, the Compatible Use Study reviews military installations and surrounding communities and their use of key resources into the future so that the military can sustain their mission in defense of the nation. In our case with Fort Huachuca, the study will look at land, the electromagnetic spectrum, and also airspace, all of which are important to DoD's mission on Fort Huachuca, but also play a role in the economic development of the city and Cochise County. Previous study was conducted in 2007, and there have been significant changes in the environment in and around Fort Huachuca. Of note, 2 key ones are the formalization of the Buffalo Soldier Electronic Test Range, which was not captured in 2007, and also the designation of Fort Huachuca as Sentinel Landscape, which includes their partnership with DoD Interior and Agriculture. The identified study area for the Joint Resource Utilization Study is 2,500 square miles of the Buffalo Soldier Electronic Test Range. The City of Sierra Vista will serve as the executive agent for the grant, and we'll also have roles in the policy committee, which will set the guidelines for the study, and the technical committee, which will provide a lot of data as they move forward. We will be required to have a 10% match. We'll utilize that between salaries and fringe and in-kind, and we've included that in the upcoming budget to account for the federal grant as well as the match. The expected outcomes of the study include identifying initiatives that we, the city, county, or state can work to minimize encroachment or interference in future Fort Huachuca missions. And for example, those may be policy or legal issues. It also provides deliverables such as GIS products on things like DoD excess property. In this case, the 203 acres would be our line on that one. Natural resources, endangered species, zoning, land use, and others. And the good news is all of the participants will be able to use those layers into the future. There is an element public engagement to reinforce the mission and importance of Fort Huachuca. It will identify projects that may be funded by future OEA grants or legislative initiatives to fund projects on Fort Huachuca. And finally, the study will look at better positioning for the future with resiliency and mission-oriented efforts while balancing economic development in the local community. Just as a reference, Pinal County is going through one, so is Yuma within the state. Approximate timeline, consultants will begin roughly in July of 2020, and they'll provide the final report in August of 2021. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll take questions.
I've got a couple just to get it kicked off. Staff lead for the post is who?
Right now, it's coming through DPW, Public Works on the Garrison side.
Okay, so Public Works on the, and Chuck, who is our staff lead?
Mr. Boone, their staff.
Okay, and who's assisting him?
Well, probably Mr. McLaughlin, because it involves planning.
And how about, we don't have requirements? I'm trying to see where he is here. I know she was here a minute ago. Sharon?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, because
Okay.
it's, dealing more with land use, resource use. So.
Okay. I'm trying to think what else. I'll think of it here in a minute. Any other questions for Mr. Boone? Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was there anything in there about, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but employee availability for anything happening between the two, between us and the
Councilmember Calhoun, I would say no. I mean, really, it comes down to the resource allocation, so much personnel management.
Oh, I wondered if people were part of the resources anywhere in that. So.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, obviously, this gets towards the issue of encroachment. The last time, of course, we did this, it was a very important issue with regards to potential bracks. We don't see that coming up, but certainly these are very important planning documents for us. To get back to your question about Ms. Flassar's involvement, since she has been a point person on the Western Regional Partnership, if there's any overlap with that, certainly.
Sentinel Landscapes.
Yeah, Sentinel Landscape.
Yeah, okay.
And
Go ahead, you still got the floor.
okay, if I did and, that means I wasn't finished yet. I was just curious about the public involvement part. Didn't read through that. Is it, how much do we involve the public, or is that just committee type involvement?
The consultant will lead the public engagement, so there is an element when you look at the Office of Economic Adjustment, they want to highlight the importance of military missions. So there's kind of a twofold, one to get feedback from the stakeholders, and when you realize it's 2,500 square miles, that's a significant stakeholder pile.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be public engagement. I can't tell you, I mean, it's one of the tasks that we've included with the consultant and in the statement of work, but I can't tell you what the mechanics of that would look like over the year.
Okay.
Well, that was another question. You allocated money for, well, it's be in the budget for this year. And obviously, I understand that our contribution will be taken out to hide by salaries, et cetera, and time spent. Is it a one-year process, or it could be potentially a follow-on year?
Well, Mr. Mayor, the current schedule would run it through August 21, where they would deliver the report. I have to assume
borrowing any
COVID-19 and some of the other requirements may have an impact on that.
Okay, so we may be seeing it during the second budget year potentially.
Yes, sir.
That's what I want to know. Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Boone, I see that Cochise County is one of the partners that would help us. Who else would be a non-federal partner besides Cochise County?
Well,
And if
Mayor,
you said that, I apologize.
no, that's fine. I didn't go through all the potential stakeholders. So, Mayor Pro Tem Gray, it would run the communities of Douglas, Benson, Toom, I mean, all of those local municipalities through Cochise County.
Okay.
We could reach in, and we tried at the very beginning to reach into Santa Cruz because that is impacted by the 2,500 square miles. I've reached into the Arizona Commerce Authority. In many cases, they were a player. So I've got a commitment for a state rep to be involved in. So that's kind of the municipal side of the house. The consultant will then go out and work landowners and those types of stakeholders. So that's kind of part of their role when they come on.
Okay, and then I have a second part of that question, if that's okay.
Can I grab on that same subject
Yes.
real quick?
Of course you can.
The civilian who's supposed to advise the State Military Affairs Commission, who is not, the job isn't filled right now. That's another person you need to at least approach and let them know what's going on.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So the 10% match, which would be 50,000, is right.
And that's a planning number.
Okay, understood. But we'll use around that for simplicity's sake. So of the 50,000, Cochise County is also going to do it looks like an in-kind match. But of that same 50,000, that's the 10% match.
Mayor
Right?
Pro Tem, correct.
Okay.
Right. So municipal if we use 50, the match would be 55,000. So, because again, it's the total. It's a 10% of the total grant. So our contribution, their contribution. But yes, so Cochise County
Okay, I'm
is
sorry. I'm
involved.
only seeing a 500,000 number on the memo, so that's why I'm.
Well, again, just a planning factor. So if the OEA, the federal grant is $500,000, we will have to match that.
10%.
So, correct. So that puts us at 550, right?
Because I can't do math today.
Right,
So,
and I don't want to
okay.
do math in public either.
Okay.
So part of the, and I'll be honest, part of the criteria for this grant, we're not advertising the cost because we want them to come in at an aggressive pace.
Understood.
So again, that's just kind of a placeholder.
The numbers don't really matter as far as the question's concerned. I'm just saying that 10% match, it would be split among all of the non-federal partners that would participate
Right now with
with
it,
services.
correct. With the base budget, it's tied directly to the city of Sierra Vista and Cochise County, which will do the vast majority of the heavy lift.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Any other questions for Tony? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Boone. We'll now move on to item number 5, and Community Development Block Grant. Doesn't go away, Mr. McLaughlin, does it?
Every once in a while it does.
Okay, so this concerns our regular annual allotment of CDBG funding for the upcoming program year, which came in at $271,810. At this point, we've had multiple meetings regarding his proposed application towards implementing the final phase of the Eddie Sear Park Master Plan. The project will consist of adding new parking, a paved multi-use path that will link the existing trail system to connect Eddie Sear with Soldier Creek Park. Any money will be used for landscaping. You'll know that we demolished the buildings on the property late last year, and this is a continuation of our effort to turn the site into an asset for the community. Majority of the households within the surrounding neighborhood are within the low to moderate income bracket, providing an area benefit consistent with HUD objectives. Comment has been received through the comment period. We'll be asking for authorization on Thursday to submit the plan to HUD, and it normally takes about 60 days for them to review and approve. Our engineers will be working on the construction plans for Soldier Creek Park and James Landwehr Plaza during the first part of the next fiscal year, and this project will follow. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. McLaughlin, and this is the regular, just so everybody remembers, this is the regular CDB money that we would get on an annual basis. Questions or discussion?
No,
We're letting you get off easy today, Matt. Thank you.
we've had lots of discussion.
Yeah, we have. Let's see. Now the main heavy bout here. Next is the,
Ms. Fox, how much would you about that?
this is the Federal Aviation Grant. Ms. Flassar. I was getting ahead of myself.
Yes, I don't know what's heavyweight about
Yeah.
that.
I know, I was like, how I looked at it.
I was looking at the next.
What did I miss?
Looking at the next one because I saw your name. So this could be good.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this agenda item will accept a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration for $30,000 of CARES Act funding for the Sierra Vista Municipal Airport. The funds can only be used for expenses related to the airport, but are otherwise reasonably unconstrained. It cannot be used for new construction, but operations, maintenance, or debt service are all eligible expenses. If approved, the funding will be used to offset the expenses associated with the Sierra Vista Municipal Airport, and no grant match is required. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question, yes, ma'am.
Are we tying it into any particular project or anything? We're just overriding funds, because we talked about with the maintenance of what was the apron, whatever. I'm using the wrong word, but whatever.
You're actually correct.
They've been complaining about that for a long time, the apron on the airport, repairing the concrete.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, we are getting a separate grant for the airport apron. So this is completely different than that. I had the exact same question for our consultant.
Use the right word.
Yes. But this is completely separate. This is basically $30,000 to offset maintenance expenses associated with increased cleaning, other operational impacts of COVID-19.
And I was going to say, 30 grand is not going to be enough to cut concrete that portion that needs to be worked on, so.
But
No.
even though it's a small amount, to be able to use it for O&M is helpful
great.
to us in next year's budget.
Okay. You got to spend it 1 year, or you got 2 years to spend it?
I forget what the time frame was on this one.
I thought I read 2, but we could spend it.
It'll be gone in one. $30,000, it'll be gone in one.
We'll spend that first.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions on that item?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Flusar.
Back.
Yeah, you'll be back next. Okay. That includes our council meeting, other than comments and requests by the council. We now go to item number B. Item B, the update of the Fry Boulevard North Garden project. Mrs. Flusar. This is the main event.
Told you I'd be back. I'll put that up there now. I'm not going to speak to it quite yet. Let me get. To be, maybe? No? Census? No?
Since it's important.
Yes, very important. I'm trying to find where it is.
I've been very good and filled mine out as everybody else.
Yes.
I returned mine the first
I have
weekend.
mine out. I don't think so.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, it should be a PowerPoint. I've got mine printed out, so I can go without, but.
Because a lot of times when this is up, but not there.
While they're
Oh, there we
it
go.
is.
While they're digging this out, council members, I just want to say that
Thank you.
the purpose of today's meeting is to make sure we have consensus on this item, and we've given proper direction to staff so that they can execute, and you'll tell us when we're going to be able to start executing and actually put out the contract, I guess, first, and then start building.
Correct.
So we're half a step back, but again, we want to make sure we have consensus among the council based on the public input. Ms. Flusar.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So as the mayor noted, I'm here to provide you with an update on the Fry North Garden project and hopefully have a decision point at the end of this. So first, a brief recap on the project history. First step was a design concept report that was undertaken by the MPO about 5 years ago. Those of you who were around at the time may recall that there wasn't any formal action of council at the end of that process. Council chose not to accept the final design concept report, and part of the reasoning given at that time was to leave open future design ideas and see how the project moved forward and make the design or make the decisions in regard to the design at a later time. Next step that came up was in fiscal year 2017-2019, council's last strategic plan. There was an objective in there to partner with the Sierra Vista Metropolitan Planning Organization to fund and construct Phase 1 of the Fry Boulevard Corridor and North Garden Avenue plans. So with those marching orders, staff got started moving forward the project. As luck would have it, right around the same time, a funding stream opened up, and the primary fund for this project is what's called HERF Exchange. HERF Exchange was a popular state program that existed a number of years ago. It went away for a few years and then it came back. And basically what it allows local governments to do to exchange hard-to-use federal funding with the state for state funds. The state takes the federal funds and they pass the state funds down to the local governments. So you have this pot of money, but you don't have as many strings attached as you have with federal funds. It's a little bit easier to use. So when the state brought back the HERF exchange program, we were able to get funding for this project. And then also there is some funding coming through the Sierra Vista Metropolitan Planning Organization. And the HERF exchange do go through the SVMPO. Next up, we have EPS Group as the design consultant for the project. One point I forgot to mention on the HERF exchange is that those funds have less strings attached. There are still some restrictions on how they can be used. One question we've gotten is, why can't you just fill more? Is not eligible for HERF exchange. Neither are local roadways. They have to be what's called a functionally classified roadway, which is collector or arterial. So Fry Boulevard qualified, filling potholes or doing an overlay project on a local road would not. So we hired EPS Group through a competitive process as the design consultant for this project. The previous strategic plan was completed, and we started a new strategic plan, 2019. And the objective there was to implement Phase 1 of the Fry Boulevard and North Garden Avenue Streetscape Improvement Project. So that is our current effort. Where we are at today is EPS Group has finished the public participation element, and they are looking to move on to construction document completion. However, in order to do that, they need a second notice to proceed from the city, and along with that, they need us to tell them which concept they would like us to move forward with. So a little bit about the public meetings. Public meetings were held on November 13th and March 4th. There was about 100 members of the public at each of the groups of meetings. So 100 on November 13th, 100 on 4th. Many of you were in attendance at those meetings, so you know basically how they ran. The first meeting was largely focused on elements. And these were not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they were things like bike lanes, multi-use paths, parking, landscaping, trying to get an idea of what kind of elements the public wanted to see in this project that would help inform the next stage. So the E incorporated the popular elements into the streetscape concepts, and we had the second group of meetings on March 4th. And the second meetings asked the public to evaluate the concepts. There were two presented at the meeting. First was Boardwalk, and that more focused on the parking element, which was something we'd heard from businesses that was important. Additional parking, in this case is on-street parking. Meanwhile, the Parkway concept focused more on landscaping and water harvesting. So at both sets of public meetings, the public was given tokens and asked to vote their preference. And then they were also given comment forms to fill out at the meeting for anything that wasn't covered by the voting. I would say after the first meeting, the majority of the comments we got back were positive. A few people were concerned about traffic delays associated with going down to 3 lanes on Fry Boulevard. A small minority were not in favor of the project at all. Comments were it won't work, and that there's too much crime in the area and those sorts of things. The second meeting was much the same. Again, we did have a small vocal minority that did not want the project at all. I will note that the voting between the Boardwalk and Parkway concepts was fairly close. Boardwalk won, but by a margin of 56 to 44%. So it was pretty close. We also got less comment forms turned in at the second round of meetings. So although we had about the same number of people in attendance, fewer filled out the comment forms at the end. All of that information was provided to council in the council reading room, so you would have had an opportunity to review that as well. And then in response to the last round of public meetings, since the concepts ended up so close, 56 to 44%. The consultant came up with a third concept after the meeting that I'm calling it the Boardway concept because it sounded better than Park Walk, which didn't make any sense. It's also possible I've been alone in my office too much. But the Boardway concept looks very similar to the Boardwalk concept, and I'll go through each of them in just a minute here. But it incorporates water harvesting, which was a very popular feature of the Parkway concept. We'll note also that of the comment forms that were turned in at the last public meeting, the number or the percentage of people who said they were very enthused about this project was 73% versus not enthused. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the wording was correct. Yes, not enthused, 27%. So we still had the majority of people in attendance that were pretty excited about this project. So going through each of the concepts, and I know this is going to be hard to see on the computer screen, so I printed out the 11 by 17s for everyone. As I mentioned, the primary feature of the boardwalk concept is the on-street parking. It also has dedicated areas for both pedestrians, which is a minimum of 7 feet, and bicycles, a minimum of 5 feet. So it devotes quite a bit of space to those alternative traffic modes, as well as on-street parking. Potential negatives of this concept are the comfort and adoption of on-street parking, additional costs to construct the pedestrian amenity. It's a little bit more expensive to construct concrete than it is landscaping. So this one would be a little bit more expensive at the start, and also lessened visual impact. And you'll see when we get to the Parkway concept how without the various, I'll call them bump outs, for on-street parking, the Parkway concept looks very linear. But this was the quote-unquote winning concept from the second public meeting. But right behind it was the Parkway concept. You can see this concept is very linear. This one gives a lot more attention to landscaping. It still has space available for pedestrians and bicycles, but it's less. It is a combined 10 feet, 5 feet for each. The negatives of this concept are obviously no on-street parking with this one. Maintenance of landscaping in the long term, and also less space for pedestrians and bicyclists than the other concept. And then last but certainly not least is the Boardway concept, as I've referred to it. This is very largely the boardwalk concept. The distinction is a note that appears on the far right-hand corner. And basically what that note says is rainwater harvesting. If you look back to the boardwalk concept, that just said landscaping. So the consultant was trying to incorporate those rainwater harvesting elements that the public indicated they really liked in the Parkway concept into what I'm referring to as the Boardway plan. Otherwise, it is identical to the boardwalk concept that was presented at the public meeting.
Sharon,
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you explain like where the water harvesting, I guess I just don't understand where it's incorporated or how it's incorporated.
Okay, the best way to do this, I won't point. If you look at the dark green areas on here, they're dark green geometric shapes. Mm-hmm. That is the areas that would be used for water harvesting. And what that would look like is it's a lowered area, typically either without curbs or with notches in the curb that the rainwater is allowed to flow into, and then you can either install a storm drain under it or just let it percolate into the ground. Obviously, just letting it soak into the ground is the least expensive option over a storm drain option.
Okay.
And all it's doing is instead of the water hitting the gutter on the side of the street and running off, it basically moves into a little lower basin. So that can be used then for the trees, et cetera, as well as the percolation into the ground. And these are there's a couple of places in town that have these. They're used in a lot of places in Tucson as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And they are very commonly used in parking lots. You'll see
Yep.
them a lot there. It provides a nice supplement to irrigation, especially, you know, when we have a little bit better rain characteristics here than Tucson and Phoenix. Irrigation's very expensive, so if you can get away from that by providing a way for natural drainage to get to those plants, it is a lower cost alternative in the long term. Yes, you have to maintain the plants, but you'd be doing that anyhow with landscaping along the public road.
I have a follow-up on that. We had talked about the issues with rainwater draining in that area in the West End. Is this going to be planned to help with that at all, or it won't address it all the way, but because it's a massive project, but it will alleviate some of it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, yes, this will help somewhat with that. As you noted, there are some significant issues with drainage in the West End. It was mainly developed before current development codes were in place, which required retention, detention. There are some other things we're looking to do as separate efforts with the update of the surface water plan. We're looking at, is there opportunities to improve drainage through enhanced green space or retention, detention in areas in the West End? So I would call this one aspect of a greater picture. Will this address all stormwater needs in the West End of Sierra Vista? No, it will not. Will it help? Absolutely it will.
And that's one of the key things, though, is that the note is we can deal with the water that comes to the roadway. Okay, some of the stuff that's off the roadway, we're not going to be able to address. As we get past, as we go further to the east and on the north side of 6th and 7th, there's some issues there as well as we hit the county enclave areas. And that's going to have to be dealt with at that time. Obviously, we're not fixing that first. And obviously, we're probably not going to be putting the road through the county enclave area. Drainage issues in those 5th, 6th, and 7th Street areas. And so that's a future issue that we need to take in consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may actually ask a question, this is an add-on to Councilmember Pacheco's. One of my questions was definitely about the rainwater drainage issue. As far as either the boardway or the boardwalk issue, and they're having off-site parking, will that parking actually be available? I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this question. Let's say in monsoon season, where I understand we're taking out parts of the road, and I can tell you, I know during certain months of the year, we're down to 3 lanes anyway.
Yep.
So is it going to accept the drainage so people would be able to park there? Are we going to take care of that problem? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
I'm not phrasing this
I do. So
articulately.
Basically what you're saying is the existing roadway is at or over capacity in regards to drainage. So when you take the outer lanes and make them parking, what does that look like during a monsoon?
Will you actually be able to park there since we're taking them away? And like I said, during about mid-June to mid-August, we're 3 lanes on Fry on that part anyway. Are we giving us back some roadway?
Well, the good news is the 3 lanes that are currently passable during monsoon will continue to be, because that's the section of the road. So really it comes down to that parking area and what happens there. The enhanced rainwater harvesting will certainly help with that issue. Right now, part of the problem is there's nowhere for the water to go. It hits a storm drain, it backs up, and we have a big giant puddle. The whole point of the water harvesting is to give that water a place to go. And then working in hand with possible upgrades in other areas to install additional green space, to possibly find a location for a regional basin. And I say possibly just because that's hard in an area like the West End that's largely developed. But can we find a space to do it? We're looking.
So if we vote with either the boardway or the boardwalk design, as people have voted for, we can assume that those parking spaces, for the most part, are going to be largely usable?
we are certainly going to do our best. I will tell you, those are going to be the first areas that get inundated in a big storm, and they have to be. We would much rather have the flow there than overtopping the center of the road. So,
Understood.
yes, with the caveat.
Understood. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sharon, could you say a little bit about parking other than the parking on the street? What will be available to shoppers?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Calhoun, the parking on site, there may be some minor modifications that have to be done as a result of driveway relocations, consolidation, that sort of thing. But in general, on-site parking will stay very, very similar to the way it looks now. I do not foresee a huge reduction in on-site parking capacity. That is one thing we've heard from the businesses loud and clear, that they need parking for their business to keep it viable. So that's certainly a consideration that we have heard from them.
And I just want to jump onto that as well. We need to make sure we're working very diligently with the adjacent landowners so that they can have share entrances and that kind of things for their on-site parking.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're going to do your best to make sure we don't block access to that. And speaking of which, not in the first phase, but in the second phase, we have a number of commercial vehicle lots.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to have their cars parked either right at the edge or near the edge, or maybe hanging over a little bit.
Quite possibly the latter.
Yeah. And the challenge is going to be able to do the vegetation and for them to still have the visibility from the street of their merchandise that's hopefully parked on their property. So that's another challenge that when we get down to the final pen and ink that we're going to have to look at. And again, it's not this phase. It'll be the latter phase because there's 2 or 3 of them in the latter phase where that may be a challenge.
Understood, yes. One thing this project will have no shortages of is challenges.
Yeah. Anybody else? I'm going to mention a couple things on existing landscape, and I'll give you the example of the bank, Wells Fargo. They got a nice xeriscape landscape right in front of their property, and rather than dig up some of that, we need to integrate so it's the same, okay? And we don't, dig something up and then replace it and add costs.
Right.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, we would attempt to do that to the maximum extent possible, because like you
Of
say,
course.
helps our bottom
And I
line.
know on the north side, there's a little medical place, and they've done a lot of nice little landscaping there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where we want to go with this, I think. The other comment that I made is, as this is an east-west street, we need to make sure that any trees that are shade trees need to be on the south side of the pedestrian bicycle walkway as much as possible to give those folks shade. I understand based on where the entrance of the businesses are and all those things, that's going to have to be adaptable, but that needs to be a consideration as well. Any other comments?
Are we talking about the alternatives yet, or are we still waiting?
Well, I have one more slide.
Okay,
That,
I'm
'cause
sorry.
I have
I'm
some-
sorry, I jumped the gun. Go ahead.
All right, so what the next steps of this process will look like, as the mayor alluded to, hopefully today we will have our next group of marching orders for a preferred option, which will then be translated into design development. We currently anticipate that design going through the end of the year, possibly slightly into next year, with construction then starting immediately thereafter. I will note that there have been impacts associated with COVID-19. Of course, everyone has had impacts associated with that. So we have submitted a formal request to ADOT for an extension on the project due to impacts associated with COVID-19. We received a preliminary positive response back from them. We have not gotten the formal okay from them yet, but we expect that about any time now. It's not to say that we will use the full extension if we don't need it, but at the same time, it's gotten pretty hard to anticipate what the next couple months are going to look like for construction projects. So at this point, we're just making sure that we are covered, and we certainly won't be the only local government in this position. I believe we are one of the first to ask, but we will be far from the last to request a time extension due to impacts associated with the virus. And with that, I would be happy to answer any additional questions.
We're at the point now where I think I heard that Boardway is the staff recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, board would be the staff recommendation,
Okay.
yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One, I enjoy the rainwater harvesting thing. I totally agree with our citizenship on that. My one major concern between the Parkway and the Boardway project is when I'm looking at the Boardway project, the center medians look very long, and I'm not sure how that's going to impact businesses, but I know, for example, on Wilcox and on 92, I'm not a direction person, but I know which one it's this side. You know what I'm talking about.
I got you. I got you.
It's over here, and it can be a problem, and I don't want when people are going down Fry to have to pull. For example, my parents are like, "Oh, we don't go down Wilcox because if we want to do anything, we have to." They don't pull a UE, but you know what I'm saying.
I do. And I had a similar question come up before the meeting. Be assured that the medians right now are purely conceptual. There has been discussion that, yes, if you put a raised or a depressed, either way you look at it, median in the center of the road, then that obviously has the potential to block access. So that would need to be a collaborative process with the property owners, moving, consolidating driveways, if we can make that happen. There's no doubt that a landscape median in the center of the roadway adds a lot visually, but it has to be done carefully to not create other unanticipated impacts.
Okay, I guess that's my only big thing. I like the Boardway. I'm just worried about the medians.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because the other thing I had on my list was the crosswalks. We're in desperate need of a couple of places on the eastern end, probably not in the early project, of having safe crosswalks because I see people riding bikes or running across the street on a number of occasions. Mm-hmm. And when we put those in, it gets back to being able to see visually what's going on in that median area. And obviously, traffic control devices, signs, or something is going to have to be done. So I don't think in the first phase there's a situation where we're putting a walkway in, if I remember correct.
Yeah.
But in future phases, we need to make sure we have safe walkways that are attractive, but the visual has got to be there. And the people who are new to town, going east or west for the first time, know that yes, there is a crosswalk up here. So, did I see a hand over here? Ma'am.
On the separate bike lane from the dedicated walk lane, how is that going to be defined?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, typically that would be defined by striping. In some areas, they'll use like colored pavers to achieve the same impact as striping, but it wouldn't be a hard line because if you're a bicyclist, sometimes you might need to swerve for some reason if you need to pass somebody else and there's no pedestrians on the other side. So there would be some sort of a delineation there, but I would refer to it as soft delineation.
And that's where signage is also key for safety.
Correct.
And we have an education piece there because right now, I can tell you, we got adults riding their bicycles on the sidewalk when in fact they probably should be on the road, or even when we have a bike lane, they're up on the sidewalk. So there's a whole education piece of that needs to happen there.
That was on that, just a comment. I mean, is wondering whether people would even respect the different lane, a line and a sidewalk or not. Or if it's arbitrary to have it there, I don't know. But did you receive any comments from the public on that specific feature of the bike lane on next to a pedestrian lane on a sidewalk?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, that was one of the items that was on one of the boards at the first public meeting and was discussed in some depth with people who came up to the boards. I know because I was at those. People generally were supportive of the idea. They supported that over a bike lane on the street and the sidewalk separated up on the side of the road. And the reason was because the bike lane up on the side of the road provided additional opportunities for younger children. Most parents would not let their kid ride in a bike lane on an arterial roadway, but they will let them ride on a multi-use path. So people were supportive of the idea. They did ask the question, how are you going to separate the two? It certainly would be an education process. I can tell you it does work other places. Anyone who's ever walked around the U of A knows there's pedestrian areas structured separately from bicycle areas, and those are respected. Obviously a little bit different of a dynamic than we have here, but it'll be an education process.
Okay.
And I can just say as an adult, I won't ride on Fry. I wouldn't ride a bike lane on Fry.
I wouldn't either.
Some people don't want to drive cars on Fry, but that's another story. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At one point, we discussed, I'll call it amenities in the pedestrian area for maybe benches or something of that sort, where people could just sit and enjoy the view. Is that still considered on the boardway?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Calhoun, yes, areas for pedestrian amenities are still being considered. Those would be defined as the project moves forward based on specific location.
And in addition to that, what about locations designated for public art? I don't remember us talking about that at all, but is that designated also?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Calhoun, that was another of the elements that was present at the first public meeting for people to vote on. I don't recall that it got a great deal of votes. I didn't bring the statistics with me. But certainly public art can still be incorporated into the project in many of the same zones as the benches and other features that you just referenced.
Actually, I'll share with you, I know this isn't going to surprise you, but in discussion about this, the city manager had a great idea. And that is we could get a hold of some of our local artists and actually for a small amount rent space or have, offer space for them to put their projects and leave it there until they sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So we may end up having some good stuff made on a regular basis with very little cost to the city to bring that art. So,
right. In addition to that, if I could add one more thing, we had talked. Let me see. Oh, we had talked at one point quite a while ago about kiosks, the ability to perhaps rent kiosk space, maybe a permanent kiosk. I'm not sure, that hasn't been defined, where pop-up stores could have a place to sell.
I think that can be looked at. Obviously, that's going to depend on the size of the place where we have the benches or the little public space. That may be appropriate to do that.
Okay. So there's still room for
this kind of concept also lends itself to enhancing the West End Fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Clarification. Sharon, on the boardway, it's still 7-foot, 5-foot split for pedestrians and.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Gray, yes, that's correct.
And that includes, because it actually on this thing is so horrible with dimensions on stuff, so just help me. Where the street parking is, it looks thinner than obviously where it's not, so.
Are you on the boardway concept?
I am.
Yeah, it does go, it on the bikes and 5 is the minimum on the sidewalk. It can go up from there to create. Yeah.
You said that's 7?
There we are. Thank you.
No problem.
Multi-local contacts do not work with these little small numbers. I just want y'all to know.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I'm gonna
Oh,
stick.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't,
sorry.
on here. And I'm sorry if you might have mentioned this. After we agree on a concept design and we get the design development done, does it go to PNZ or does it come back to us? The process too.
We hadn't gotten to that point yet, just because we're still fairly early in the process. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, Mr. Mayor, and members, you've kind of already approved the project, so I'm not sure what the need would be to go back to P&Z necessarily, other than information.
Normally what would happen next is we bless the concept. It goes back to the and basically the project goes from there. It won't come back to us again, I don't believe.
No, we can certainly share with you.
Well, they can update
obviously,
it. They can update it as the process goes along. But as far as a decision by council, there's not another decision on council.
once you
What are you
approve
thinking?
it, it'll be in this year's budget. If that's approved, then the project's
Right.
approved.
No, because I know that it's not going to look exactly like this, and there might be some hiccups and discoveries along the way, and that might change things. So
Well,
I wasn't
in
sure.
in the past when we've done these major projects, if Sharon sees a major, I won't say Sharon, if the community development director, the city engineer, the city manager, seen a major change or a problem, quote, potential problem, they have brought this kind of thing back to us and say, hey, we know we told you we're going to do this, but now because of drainage or whatever else, we may have to adapt, and then we would be updated, and if we agreed with their solution, we're okay. If we didn't agree with their solution, we'd have to come up with something else.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's always, as you said, drainage, access, and cost are always the three
Always the big
issues you could probably bet come up, but we'll certainly share if any of those issues create snags or problems along the way.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That
Yes,
sounds
ma'am.
good.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I have one more, and I'm sorry I forgot about this initially because I've had multiple business owners ask me about this, and I assured them that I would ask. I know the main issue that a lot of the businesses are coming to me, and I just want to make sure that we're thinking about this, is the ability to still be able to get commercial trucks supply back into
And garbage trucks.
and garbage trucks and all of that. And we're thinking about that in our design. We're making sure that we're still going to be able to do that.
Yes, and that was something we had heard from business owners at the public meetings as well. The need for commercial deliveries, and that's why when we look at things like driveways, that will be a collaborative process. Because certainly the businesses know their operations better than we do. They know what kind of trucks they have come in. They know how frequently. So that will be a process with them, but it wouldn't be out there just saying,
I just promised that I would ask this question.
No, that's a good question.
That's a good question. And we also have the same concerns, Councilmember Wolf, with regards to emergency vehicles. So-
Exactly.
Yes, and that's fair.
Yeah.
That's something that has to be reviewed.
Yeah, our garbage trucks as well. They're some of the biggest ones out on the roadway. So certainly we've got to be careful about landscaping, that they're, the corners aren't so tight that they're going to run over, or they can't get into a business to service the dumpster. So we share those concerns.
And let me ask another question too. I didn't see any bus routes, but do we have we've made appropriate bus stops along the route? We're going to make appropriate adjustments for.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, bus routes have been discussed as part of the project. Traditionally, Vista Transit has tried to avoid going down the center of Fry Boulevard for some pretty obvious reasons. But yes, depending on the final layout of the project, especially with the boardway or boardwalk concept that have those parking pullouts as part of them, I can see potential to use one of those for a bus stop if the demand is there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. At this point, I'm going to get my crystal all out and assume that we have consensus on the board with the items discussed with Sharon. Do we have consensus? Anybody have a heartburn, big objection? Not seeing any. And Sharon, I think you got your marching orders.
Thank you, Mr.
Good luck with the project. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion. Okay, item number C, FY 2021 budget presentation. Chuck, did you have?
Yeah, I'll say a few words before Victoria gets started. What you're getting tonight is our balanced general fund budget presentation. And obviously, there will be some more work before you get your books and that kind of thing. Just a couple key points. There are no tax increases within this budget recommendation, so that's good. And also, the budget is able to be balanced without the use of general fund reserves as well. So we have ratcheted down revenues in certain areas. Victoria will go over those. But for the most part, I think we have a pretty good budget given the situation that we're in with the changes that Victoria will go through. So Victoria.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chuck. As Chuck said, this is the balanced budget that I'm pleased to present to you. It is our best guess at this time of what revenue will be coming in. Unfortunately, March's revenue is not in yet. We're hoping to have the sales tax reports by the end of this week or maybe next week, and that will give us a better idea of revenue going forward. So we're going to go through real quickly what the changes in revenue are since our last meeting. Capital improvements and how they've changed, some of the considerations and some of the changes and creativity and a little bit of pain we had to make to balance the budget this time, and then what our next steps are. And of course, at any time, Q&A is more than welcome. So the difference in general fund revenue between fiscal year 20 and what we're proposing for fiscal year 21 is a difference of $103,810. So what's changed from 2 weeks ago when we talked about revenue last was primarily leisure and libraries revenue projections. When we talked to you 2 weeks ago, we had kept the revenue projections even to our revenue projections for last year, which is the first column you see that's titled fiscal year 20 projection. That's even to fiscal year 20 projections. We took a hard look at those and decided to adjust the revenue projections to what the actual revenue amounts were through essentially last week in May. So the numbers you see there are the actual amounts of revenue that have come in over the past fiscal year up to last week. So that is a $573,000 reduction to leisure revenue for next year. There is unfortunately still too much uncertainty with how things are going to come back in leisure and library services, how things are going to reopen, who's going to want to participate in programs, how events are going to turn out, to adjust those numbers any other than very conservatively. So the capital projects that are unchanged from the last few presentations are listed here. To balance the budget, we needed to make some changes to the capital fund projects, and I'll go into that more on the next slide. But the ones that are currently included and unchanged are $300,000 for fire equipment, and that's the heart monitors and the CBA replacements. That is the third and final phase of those replacements. $113,000 for the council chamber AV upgrade. $60,000 for fire emission control devices. $150,000 for the police department female locker room renovation. City Hall electrical analysis, and then a carryover of $150,000 for the Raw 3 irrigation system modifications.
Victoria, what is the City Hall electrical analysis exactly?
So, Councilmember Wolf, this building is older.
Sure.
And in past years, we had talked about doing electrical replacements for the doors and how some power in some areas were maxed out. In looking at those projects for this year, it was determined that what we actually need is analysis of the whole building. It wouldn't make sense to go and replace part of it without looking at the entire picture.
And this was not, and
Part of the
forgive me,
Schneider?
that was going to be my question. This was not addressed in the Schneider project at all?
No, it has to do with the power load.
Got it.
We have areas of the building where if you plug in a desk lamp in addition to like a crock pot, something goes out.
Sure.
So
No, understood. Okay, thank you.
Sounds like my house recently.
You mean you can do that in most places?
So the changes that we had to make to the capital projects for next year include the EMS substation. We will budget $100,000 to complete the design, but we will push back the construction to start in July of 2021. That will put the budgeting for the construction in next year's budget and take it out of this year's capital improvement fund. So
How much was that?
we're estimating about 1.2 million.
Okay.
So we'll be able to complete the design this year. We expect if everything goes as planned, we'd probably be able to go out, put an RFP out for the construction starting next spring. So we'd be ready to go starting in July. And it will most likely only push construction back a few months. The library VDI system, that's the replacement for the library computer system, was moved to grant funds. And I've asked Ms. Wilson to work with the Friends of the Library groups to see if they will agree to fund part or all of that system.
Is that the total cost there, the 110?
Yes, that is the total cost. And then 1.2 million was budgeted this year to replace one of the fire engines, and that will be moved to next year's budget. And instead, there were 2 fire department staff vehicles that were budgeted next year. So we will swap those and cover the 2 staff vehicles this year and put the truck replacement in next year's plan.
And that was the second ladder truck, right?
It was a ladder truck, yes, Mr. Mayor.
On the O&M that was presented the other day, there was 96,000, I think, plus for the library. And you were saying that was for the VDI or that was something else. Is that the VDI that was supposed to come off of there?
Councilmember Benning, no, that was just O&M. This is in the capital improvement fund.
Roger.
So those were various increases that the library had requested. We'll go over more in detail what some changes were in department budgets in your budget update sessions in June.
Okay, and I agree. I'm just trying to, I know we brought up the fact that the library had a significant increase, and I don't have my notes to say where that was supposed to go, that it wasn't supposed to be an O&M. I'll ask later when I have my data.
Yeah, Mr. Benning, I'll be happy to go over
Okay.
the changes with you after I have a chance to look at
Okay.
what the O&M changes were.
And Victoria, just to make sure, I assume that you guys have thought about this. We still have obviously at least another year or so left of Happy Fire Truck that we're flipping out. We're not switching out for higher maintenance costs that we're going to be sad about, let's say later in the year.
Councilmember Wolf, I did talk to Chief Jones, who actually suggested this, and he said we'll be okay.
Okay.
Victoria, excuse me for interrupting you again. I don't quite understand. We're replacing a $1,200,000 fire truck. We're not going to get that. We're instead going to get 2 staff vehicles.
That's correct. So in our vehicle replacement plan, the plan called to replace one of the aerial trucks this year. And then the plan called to replace 2 staff vehicles next year.
Okay.
So we're going to flip those and do 2 staff vehicles this year and the fire truck next year.
Okay. I understand now. Thank you.
And the thinking behind some of these changes too, Mr. Mayor, is that we're trying to push out some of the debt service into a fiscal year out from this next fiscal year, which will give us hopefully a little bit of a cushion depending on how our revenues come in, during this fiscal year because of the situation we're in right now.
As far as vehicles go in the capital improvement fund, there have been no real changes from previous presentations, except the fire truck at the bottom, swap for the fire staff vehicles, except how they will be financed. And I'll go into a little more detail on the next slide, but the vehicles will be financed with 10% down, paid for the capital improvement fund this time, where before that debt service would have been in the general fund, and we did that in order to balance the general fund, and I'll cover that here in just a second. So this is the list of vehicles that we'll be replacing for next year. So some of the creative things that staff did to balance the general fund budget for next year in the capital improvement fund. In previous years, the city had to do a transfer of $700,000 for street maintenance. When HERF money was lagging and there wasn't very much coming in, that was done. Last year, for the first time in a number of years, we did not do that, and so we're continuing that practice for a second year. So instead, we will use the HERF revenue that come in and built up in reserve, which are currently sitting at around $3 million as of the end of fiscal year 19. So it's a relatively healthy balance, and we'll expect to use that over the next 2 years. We'll be using the capital improvement fund to pay the debt service, so a total of $431,200.
Go back a second.
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Is Sharon still here?
Yes.
Was it, you told me, I think you did a presentation on the roads. You talked about the cost of repairing roads that we had. Was it 2.2 billion we needed to spend every year just to keep even?
Slept a lot since then. It's been a couple months.
That's been a couple months.
I'm going to say that's in the ballpark, but I'm asking not to quote me on that.
Apologize for putting you on the spot, but the one to make is, she just said 3 million over 2 years, so we're talking $1.5 million potentially for each of those 2 years, which is a lot more than what we've had in the past couple of years. However, it's a lot closer to the I'm saying 2.2 million.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Mayor, had we
that's a good thing.
Yeah, had we not found ourselves in this situation and our sales tax projections and state shared sales tax projections would have been up where we would have thought they would have been, we certainly would have been able to continue to use capital improvement funds to augment not only the HERF fund balance, but the regular funds. We would have been very close to that $2.2 million. But I hate to, budget that in there now because I know, but
I'm glad we're making progress toward the right number, Chuck.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
after being down for so long. That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yeah, and once we get out of this, we should be there.
Yeah. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, we do have the list of streets scheduled for repairs in the next year, and that will be shared with you soon. So the capital improvement fund will be paying the debt service next year of $401,000 and the down payment for the vehicle replacement program, which is $30,200 instead of the general fund. And we did that in order to balance the general fund. We also removed the new personnel requests for this year, which were 2 police officers and the management analyst for leisure and library services. So currently those are not funded in order to balance the budget.
We'll leave the police positions in unfunded for overfill purposes, though.
Okay, that was going to be my question. I'm assuming Chief Thrasher is okay with this, and we're operating just fine, right? Okay.
What is?
Now. For now.
Yes, for now.
Because everybody's inside.
What is still included in the budget is the 2% step increase for personnel, and that's approximately $340,000. And again, we did remove the market shift amount of also $340,000 as we wait to see how the market adjusts over the next year.
What does that mean, the market shift amount? Councilmember
Calhoun, last year we did 2 increases for staff. We did a 2% market shift adjustment and a 2% step increase, and we did that because of the change to the minimum wage, and that was to shift the classification compensation plan so we were above where the minimum wage fell. So we had cut it in half half and plan to do the second part of the adjustment this year. But since we are now above the minimum wage and nobody quite knows how the market's going to adjust this year with the pandemic, I decided to remove that this year, and we'll reevaluate next spring to see where the market's at.
And Victoria, we still think that we'll be at, are we running at 95 or 100% of the market for salaries?
We set that originally at 100% versus where it was at 105, but I can tell you that we're not running below 95% now.
And so we should still be in that range
Correct.
in order to be competitive.
The answer was correct, just for the record here. Okay.
Oh, we're recording it on that.
Of course.
Oh, Lord.
All right, so our next steps, we still plan to have the tentative budget book to you on May 22nd and give you plenty of time to review that. And we'll be reaching out shortly to ask if you want to schedule a meeting with staff. And those will be the week of June 1st through the 5th. And then your major budget overview work sessions will be June 15th through the 17th. We always schedule 3 afternoons. I don't think we've gone 3 afternoons for some time, but we'll schedule them in case. June 25th will be your tentative budget vote. July 23rd then will be your final budget vote and the property tax hearing, and your final step of the budget process would then happen on August 13th with the property tax vote.
Further questions from Ms. Yarborough?
I do have one.
Did you have one? Did you scratch it here?
Mr. Mayor.
Well, are
Mayor gave you
are
the
you the
floor.
chair or what?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to formulate it.
Oh, if you're not ready, go ahead. Madam Mayor
Okay.
Pro Tem.
So, Victoria, I apologize. I should have asked you this yesterday, and I meant to, and then just forgot. If projections come in lower than we anticipate due to COVID, will we just percentage shift everything down, or are we going to kind of pick and choose? How will we decide how to then rebalance the budget?
Well,
Regular members of the council, as Victoria mentioned, we're still waiting for data on sales tax. Hopefully by next week, we'll get the data for March, and then the reason we're pushing this back is hopefully to get April data. That should help us make any budget adjustments for the final budget. Two areas probably that I would really need to look at now in terms of cuts, right now really centers around the leisure and library services, because we have many part-time employees, and we may have some issues with regards to before and after school program, as well as the Cove, although I'm happy to report that the governor is opening pools. But so that alleviates some of the concern. One of the main reasons we wanted to balance without using reserves is, if ever there was a year you would probably want to use reserves or need to use them, it would be next fiscal year. And I think our reserve levels are to a point where we could use some reserves to offset, some of these revenue shortfalls. So I think we're in pretty good shape going in right now.
I have a follow-up. And then my follow-up is just reiterating that we can always revisit mid-budget year, and we just can't go over the...
Well, clearly, we're going to have to monitor revenues and expenditures closely, and, we make those internal adjustments every year anyway. But if there's something that impacts your strategic plan or your capital projects, that would be something we'd certainly want to share with you before we did that.
Keep track.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's kind of a follow-up, I think. Could you just say a little bit about the significance of moving money from capital improvement into what ordinarily would have been general fund? Is there any notable significance in what that does to general fund? We kind of know, but what that does to capital improvement funding?
Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Calhoun, essentially the major shift that we're making with regards to capital improvement funds this year is the movement of debt service that would normally be paid out of the general fund for vehicles. Those are capital items, so it does meet the definition and intent of a capital expenditure to move that debt service to the capital improvements fund. Essentially, what that does, though, is it takes away that 400,000 or so that we're moving there from potential capital projects for the coming year. So hopefully this is a one-year thing as we go through this, and we can get back on track with normal capital improvement funds the following year. The date we're trying to get to is January of 2022. That's when our two bond issues come off the books that were consolidated into one payment. And once we do that, that's going to free up significant funds for capital improvements in the future. So we got a year and a half here we can get through.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, William, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several years ago, we had a Q&A session with the community. Last year, we didn't do it where I don't know who was on council, sat out front, community came in and was able to ask questions. I'd like to see us do that again this year. And I figured right now would be the time to bring it up instead of later on trips, future meetings, because we have the next steps up. Is that something the rest of the council and yourself, Mr. Mayor, are interested in, or we can make happen?
Now, when you see the in front of here, budget work sessions, 15 to 17.
Roger, Mr. Mayor.
That's a public hearing, and if we want to schedule something where we say on the 16th or the 17th, we're going to have a input from the public, or we do it on the 15th before we start.
Roger, something like that.
But we could certainly do that. That's the time frame to do that if we do it.
And that's why I was bringing it up, because last year.
That's a public process that will be held in a public forum.
Roger.
And what you're asking for is something more than that, I think.
More than discussion of budget?
No, sir, just discuss the budget.
Oh.
Yeah. But what we do is we get the budget presentation and then ask the public to say, what do you think? What are you talking about? I'm not sure I understand.
Roger, what?
I don't want to be obtuse, but
what they did last time, I'm trying to, if people all that were on council while they did it, so the public was able to submit questions to, I believe, sure, she formulated everything, she set the time up, but the public could actually come here and ask questions in chamber, any question they had about the budget, why we were spending money on this, why we were doing this.
And that
we did, it was budget specific.
Something else. Yeah.
No, it was budget specific, I thought.
No. I recall, that's why
I got to get the date.
I'm trying.
It was a few years ago.
But that's okay.
But the whole purpose of the 15 to 17 is we basically get briefed on the budget, we ask questions, and the public can come at that point in time and ask questions as well.
Right, I agree, Mr. Mayor, and the comments like Ms. Victoria said, you can't, sometimes we don't do all 3 days because we finish early or whatever. Just want to make sure
the public hasn't shown up.
Exactly.
Basically, there was nothing controversial.
Okay.
Okay, and we can certainly talk with Judy and see what the things we need to have set up on the afternoon of the 15th or the afternoon of the 16th. Chuck.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Benning, we haven't really done that, but I could see, given the age of technology, where we will have a tentative budget book, proposed balance. We can post that, and certainly we could probably open something up on our website to field questions from the public, and try to provide responses to them and let you know, what they asked about. So there are some things we could probably do to elicit that, participate.
Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Solicit, I should say.
Yeah. On that, I'm not sure I know what you mean by the budget town hall, but isn't this, if this is a public hearing item, they could come to the work sessions anyways. And doesn't it go for a 30-day public hearing? I mean, till the July vote?
Chuck?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, certainly you can use the budget work sessions, and Mayor can open that up to the public if people want to ask questions. That's fine. There is a 30-day period after the approval of the tentative budget. The budget cannot increase during that time, but certainly it can be changed within that time. So we can get that input then, and the council can determine whether you want to make changes or
Is
not.
it like is it a public hearing where they can submit comments on the website, just like our other public hearing, right?
Yeah, they do that just like any other item that we put
Okay.
out there. Mhm.
That's what I was saying.
I just-
There's a public input
Mi-
process in place.
Ms. Mayor, do I have the floor?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to what William was saying, because the concept he was putting out there was a town hall. If I'm putting this together, I understand what you were saying. So it's a little different than a public hearing. And I as I recall, and Rachel said, it was not a budget town hall. It was general, and the topics were a multitude of different topics. However, we did talk about strategic plan having more interface with the public, and I believe this is a good idea that, you know, if we've put it out there that this is open to the public to talk about. I like what was saying about doing it electronically, but also giving specifically an opportunity for the public to come to sit with us and to talk. If they have any comment, or if they have any discussion about the budget, they have this opportunity to sit in public, face to face, talk about it. So it would need to be developed a little bit to an appropriate way for people to have an opportunity to speak, maybe by submitting questions early or not. I don't think it's necessary, but just folks here who can answer questions for the most part, it's a good idea. So if that's something you're still proposing, if that's what you had in mind, I guess, Mayor, you might want to decide how to handle that.
Well, actually, I like Chuck's suggestion. We do it electronically. We make sure that we have a point on the 15th or the 16th where we specifically can have, or maybe we do it at the end of both. We save time at the end of both budget meetings, depending on how far we go on the 15th. To basically open it up, if there are members of the public that want to discuss things, they can do that before we make a final determination on the tentative budget on the 25th.
You mean in person?
They still can here in person at the meeting. They still will have a potential, once we do the tentative budget, they still have an additional 30 days they can provide additional comments where we can make. So I think that's the way to go. Orchestrate a separate town hall, current conditions, and with the short timeline we got, maybe a little tough to do.
No, I agree, Mr. Mayor. I only brought that up because I vaguely remember it coming
It wasn't
and
budget
listening.
related. The ladies are right. We talked general subjects.
Right, and I think so too.
Yeah.
So,
Interface is the important piece.
and that's what I was
that's
looking
key,
for
Chuck.
more. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, I'm sitting through many budget work sessions. Typically, we don't have a lot of members of the public at those meetings for whatever reason. I guess if we were announcing big tax increases or something, we would probably get a lot more participation. But we're not doing that. But we do get people that do ask questions electronically and participate that way, and maybe we get more of a response. If we find a good way to do that.
Okay, so we need to we'll work on that. Well,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chuck.
all right. What else you got there, young lady?
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions for Mrs. Yarborough? Thank you, Mrs. Yarborough. Great job as usual. We next move on to reports of trips, meetings, future meetings.
I just have a question.
I ain't go nowhere.
I have not been in there at all. I'm not going anywhere, but do we know when we want to resume commission meeting?
Well, we're going to talk about the COVID-19 status, we're going to talk about how the city manager is proposing to open up the city.
Okay.
And hopefully he'll make some comments on that or recommendations to us. Okay.
Yes.
Ma'am, did you have something?
No, I was just pointing you guys out. I was looking at you. I want to go somewhere if you went somewhere.
Okay. Future discussion items and council requests. We should be having at least the first portion of the change to the boards and commissions coming before us. And then next work session for discussion. And then when that's done, we have to go back and do the commission's handbook. And I've already given my comments to Jill in detail on how all those need to be changed. And there's a portion that she needs to work on, specifically dealing with open meeting law for the boards and commissions, which has changed, and that will be a couple. I would imagine within a month or so, Jill. We want to try to get all this done by the end of July, so we've got everything done. Or excuse me, June. I was hoping to have it done. Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah, but again, we'll talk about it at a work session before we take a vote and approve each one of those separate items. Okay. Anything else? We still haven't talked about youth commission. We got to figure that one out, especially in the COVID post-COVID situation. Yep. So that's still hanging out there, but I think that's it on the commissions. Yes.
Development fees will also be the next work session on that will also be on at the next meeting.
Okay. So we got some work ahead of us, guys. Anything else on future meetings? Or excuse me, future discussion items, council requests. Then we'll go item F. Then is the council discussion, and Mr. Petitchik's going to talk to us about how we open. And if you got the poop on the governor's 3 o'clock broadcast today, we'd appreciate that too.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As a matter of fact, I've been getting updates. There's a press conference today at 3. So,
Mayor sitting right here.
so that has been occurring, as our meeting has progressed. So, Mayor is taking off the stay-at-home order on the 15th.
So as of the 16th, there will be no state order.
Yeah. So that will be no longer in effect. It sounds, I don't have all the specifics yet, but it sounds like most things are going back to quote unquote normal with appropriate social distancing and other guidance. So as soon as we have the specifics, we'll share that with you and get that out. But what that means for us is, we envision that we will be leaping into everything right away, and I'll go over some reasons for that. But right now, this is what we're looking at in terms of our facilities, and we've been working primarily with Leisure Library and Ms. Wilson on this. So on the 16th, we'll be opening the fields up for practices, rentals, and games. Bleachers are removed to encourage social distancing, and then we'll try to work with those people and have staff go out with them and try to help figure out what the best way is to encourage social distancing in those settings. The skate court will reopen. The ball courts, outdoor basketball courts will reopen. As you know, some people have been playing out there anyway, so that will be official. Dog parks will reopen, and again, we'll try to place appropriate signage on all these as well to encourage social distancing. We'll be able to do small events. I don't have guidance yet from the governor as to whether or not he lifted the group recommendations. Right now, it seems like he has. In that event, we'll be able to do large groups. So things like the farmers market and other, permitted events that Leisure and Library does, Ramada reservations, picnics, and kind of things will go back into gear. and then, of course, the tennis court. And then on May 18th, which is next Monday, we'll be reopening lobbies at City Hall, Police Department, and the Ethel Burger Center. YCC will still be closed because we have a small renovation project that will be going on in the lobby there, so we'll have to keep that closed at that time. The museum can open, and we've already been working with the museum staff on social distancing for that. The sports building at the Rothery Center, the front desk will be open there. The library, that's a little tougher. Got a lot more people going in and out, so we're going to start with book returns and curbside service, so people will be able to order their books online, and staff will then serve them with curbside service. The facility will continue to remain closed to the public. The Cove will keep closed, and we'll be discussing that because honestly, I did not think the government would have gyms and swimming pools reopen, but apparently that's the case. So we'll have to discuss that. Public Works will reopen their lobby, and then the transit building will still stay closed, although the transit service is still in. Right now, we're installing plexiglass for all the front desks. We've done that in a few cases already. We want to have the rest of them in by next Monday. Probably one of the biggest problems that we have, and the reason why we're not reopening buildings completely immediately, is cleaning supplies. We are in fierce competition with every other city, town, business, etc., for cleaning supplies and custodial services. So we've been ordering things since early March, even before shutdown orders came into effect, and we're having a very difficult time securing an ongoing stream of supplies. I want to be satisfied that we have that prior to opening up these buildings. I think the public needs to be assured that we're cleaning them properly, and we need to have supplies in order to do that. I would hate to have to reopen or close a building that we opened because we didn't have enough cleaning supplies after a couple weeks. So
Chuck, I'm reading in between the lines here. That means the bathrooms in the parks will remain closed.
Bathrooms in the parks will remain closed for now, and then the library will still remain closed, the transit center, and the Cove probably will look at now with this new guidance opening it after Memorial Day weekend, which would have been a typical opening for the Cove anyway, but we have a lot of work to do with staff in terms of social distancing and those kind of things. Swimming pools are an issue with that, but we'll be working the floor on that. So we had originally planned, and we're looking after Memorial Day for a lot of these things anyway. So a lot of those plans are already kicked off and are being worked on. So we'll be a little behind probably other cities as a result of this opening, but not more than a week or two behind. And then after Memorial Day, we'll look at reopening other things to include City Hall. Then it gets into having the public here for meetings and that kind of thing, and then of course boards and commissions at the other buildings. So I think we can start looking at your June meeting schedule for reinstituting face-to-face commission meetings. So we'll work with Bill, and we'll try to get out those meeting schedules to everybody and start normal commission meetings in June then. So that's what I have right now. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Matuchik? Everybody's okay. Just then we'll go around.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Patuchek. One thing people have been asking me about, I'm not sure what we're doing or if we've decided anything, but I'm sure you're thinking about. What are we doing as far as the 4th is concerned?
Okay. Well, that is a great question, and Mayor Mueller and I met with the Rotary president, and name is Fred Shirley, and Mr. Suskind, everybody knows, is the coordinator for 4th of July for Rotary. And, essentially, we discussed proceeding with 4th of July activities, at least the fireworks, and then looking at extreme social distancing and that kind of thing. So looking at having the 4th of July continue, but in a different mode and some live streaming and that kind of thing. With the governor's orders being lifted, looks like almost completely today, we may be able to proceed with 4th of July as we normally do. It's just we won't have the, the acts at the bench shell and that kind of thing, and maybe not quite all the support normally we would get from Fort Huachuca, because I do think Fort Huachuca, based on the guidance that we've seen, they're going to lag behind us some in terms of lifting their restrictions. So right now it looks like there will be a 4th of July celebration, and maybe not as restricted as we initially thought in our meeting that we had. Supposed to meet again with them Thursday, so we will go over the governor's orders, obviously, and see what we can do as a result. So,
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco.
I think, too, in looking at this, because I didn't really talk about the employees, and a number of our employees came back yesterday. We've had a lot of work from homes, and, clearly, not only in public, you're still going to have people that are uncomfortable being in groups, restaurants, and public places, and we understand that and we recognize that. And one thing I found through this process is we need to respect all sides of the issue, because we have both ends, reopen everything, and those that feel more comfortable being at home. And I found that you really need to respect all that. So that's why following the governor's order has been good for us, because it's been a middle road. So you run the risk of both ends of the spectrum, getting upset through this process, and we anticipate there will be some of that. But also for the employees, they need to get used to being back around each other, and we've also found that telework has also worked in a number of cases, and that may be something we'll look at in the future in terms of allowing more teleworking. So, but we are a public service organization, and we work with the public and we work with other members of staff. So it would probably be a good thing to start bringing them back. We're doing that more on a voluntary basis right now over the next couple weeks, just to get people used to that, so that they can make that choice in terms of how comfortable they are. But by June, we should be looking at getting most of the people back and identifying who really does have issues, and where teleworking might still be appropriate. So we're letting that kind of happen on its own over the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And if I could ask, if you could just sort of keep us updated, even if it's just an email. I know I'm fielding a lot of questions about the 4th. I'm very certain I am not the only one on council fielding those questions. So anything or any information, even if it's just a quick email, hey, this is what's going on, if something changes, would be awesome.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank
Again,
you.
I didn't think the governor would go as far as it appears that he is doing right now. So that may change our stance, but we're always looking at having some sort of a celebration, maybe scale down, but maybe it won't have to be as much now. Mm-hmm.
And the other celebration is Memorial Day.
Yeah.
As of last week, when I talked to Joe out at the cemetery, his bosses said they weren't going to do anything, and then the latest I heard is they were going to try to do something remotely to include all the state cemeteries. Well, now that the governor's lifted his guidance, I'll have to get back with Joe and find out what's going on with Memorial Day, because I'm sure the United Veterans Council is probably ready to go, even though they haven't practiced anything yet. So that's get the word out on that one as soon as we can too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
You guys just answered. That was my question. Was Memorial Day and 4th of July? So
We're good. That's what I'm going to say.
It's hard to be so good, Mr. Mayor.
Gwen?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. On a little bit of a different note, I was curious about, with all the restrooms being closed around the city, yeah, I've been waiting for them to open. Actually, this is a little more serious. I'm concerned about what's happening with the homeless folks in the community. Where have they been able to? I know the Neighbor Alliance is open for day use, but I'm curious: have we been able to support those who are homeless in our community at all?
Well, Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Calhoun, we haven't had, a lot of issues with homeless, and Adam, I don't think it's really been major issue. We know we have a camp forming back behind Bashas and that kind of thing, and we're going to probably start working on that here pretty soon. But actually, I've seen panhandling actually drop during this time.
I've noticed that.
And, we haven't really had a lot of issues. We had to close the restrooms, frankly, keeping them cleaning supplies, and unfortunately people were stealing toilet paper out of the restrooms during the hoarding period that we went through. So that had to be closed. Again, I want to make sure we have adequate cleaning supplies. Obviously, if the park is going to be open, the need for the restrooms will be apparent, and hopefully after Memorial Day, we'll be able to open those up.
I was curious also about the cafe and library. Are they going to be able to come back?
I'll have to have Laura address that. Yeah, she says yes.
Wonderful,
so that's good.
wonderful. That happened. I mean, they were about to open right when everything closed down. So it's great that they're coming back.
Yeah, so if we can get the lobby opened and they do the social distancing, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, Councilmember Calhoun, I spoke to Emily about this, and she reached out to the cafe owner, and because we can lock off the library from that portion, we're just taking out some of the tables to allow the distancing, and we're hoping that she gets up and running next week.
That's terrific. Oh, next week. That's really good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. No, I think that's it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just reading the guidance while y'all were talking and listening at the same time, but he is still limiting it to a congregation of no more than 10 in his order,
So
and
we'll have
when
to limit to
feasible.
small groups then. So we've got a month and a half, a little more till 4th of July. So hopefully he'll lift that or take that back up to 50. And that would certainly help our celebration.
But that gets back to what we discussed was got to have a couple of contingency plans.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
things will change between now and 4th of July, just like they just changed it today.
And he does caveat that to in relation to the size of the location, as long as you can maintain social distancing, but congregational wise, he wants it to stay 10.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? William.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Probably more just a comment. I like the plan going forward, that we can see. I know just using one other state, Florida opened up Friday, and since Friday they have over 25 cases because they went hog wild and did all kinds of things, and it just was out of control. So I'm glad that we have a plan. I'm glad service is opening back up, but I like our plan going forward, and we're being smart about it.
Sensibly.
Yeah.
Sensibly.
We need to make sure that people still social distance and everything else.
And I will certainly mention this in my report Thursday, and I'll go over the reopening plans as well in my report, if anybody's watching. But certainly the community has responded very well to the situation, and generally, and I think you can vouch for this, we haven't had that many enforcement issues here in town. I think initially, the biggest problems with hoarding and rushing stores and that kind of thing was probably the toughest part, but as people adjusted, I think things settled out. Certainly kudos to the community for what they've done, and I think our folks are sensible and will continue to be sensible until things improve even further. So that's our hope, and I think we can count on them to do that.
Mrs. Pacheco.
Okay, here's my idea. This is crazy. You say, oh no. What if for 4th of July we block off? Don't we usually block Highway 90 anyways? From
It'll have to
Coronado.
be for the.
But you could, people could park there to watch it like a drive-in fireworks
Sarah, what was discussed was, there is a capability of having a broadcast on the on a radio, AM low voltage. We talked exactly about designated parking areas, not on the highway, but around the area.
Pavement just right there.
Yeah, I understand, but it's a state highway, so they get sensitive.
You got on the cover.
I got it.
The chief's going
Yeah.
to counsel you here.
Yeah, sorry, but that is a state highway, so we have to get a permit to shut it down by ADOT. They will not allow parking on it. It's also within the safety zone, the fireworks.
Yep.
That's why we block it off in the first place. So when the fireworks go up, that's the part of the safety zone. Where
There are parking.
is closer
There are parking places around that are not in the safety zone, where we can arrange with like Walmart or Ranch or whatever the store is over there, to use those lots where they can see the air show, they can get the narration on the radio. So it's not the same as sitting on the blanket on the grass, but they can do that. There's also talk about working with Cox to put it on video. So not only can we look at the celebration here, but for those small communities that aren't going to be able to have fireworks because they got to order them by the 15th of this month, that they can get there. So there's a number of things in the works and a number of contingencies. And as we have more information for the public, we'll be more than happy to share. But that's a good idea because we thought of that already.
Would have been say all that. Seen it.
Okay. Will?
To get away from 4th of July, because it's a beautiful holiday. Memorial Day. Do we have any idea what's going on, if any?
Well, yeah. What I mentioned is, it was Memorial Day was when I talked to Joe out at the cemetery. He basically said that the state director said no, we're not having anything. They went back and were talking about a contingency to be able to have some type of video at all 3 cemeteries. However, now that it appears to be open, and I don't know what his boss say with the 10-person rule, but
Or in relation to the
yeah,
size.
yeah. But anyway, I'll get with Joe and find out what if anything has changed with his boss, because basically it's the Veterans Affairs Director or the Cemetery Director that deals with whether we get an okay or not. So that's not a city operation. Just like technically the 4th of July is a Rotary operation, although obviously we got a bigger hand in that.
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, all right. I sleep up here too sometimes. Okay.
I've done it.
I don't think so.
Anything else? Chuck, did you complete your remarks?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so Chuck will give a little more information to the public, and we'll have a time to digest what the governor's just laid on us. Ma'am.
I just had. So, sorry. Happy National Police Week.
Oh,
Are you
yeah.
guys doing anything? Because they had to cancel the ceremony and everything.
They're in lockdown.
Yeah. They're going to paint the town blue.
Paint the town blue.
Yes, ma'am. We're only doing the announcements for social media because of the restrictions in for gatherings, and so we are not doing our typical ceremony.
You don't have any alternative or anything.
Mr. Patucci.
Yeah, also, Mr. Mayor, and, thanks for bringing that up, Sarah, although this is specific to police, but the employees, especially those that have had to continue working out on the street here, and of course those that had to work from home and other, change their schedules, really deserve, thanks for, what they've been able to do during this time. And we had to put off our annual awards ceremony, which is, of course, our most well-attended employee event every year. So I've asked staff to plan on something in the park, hopefully this summer, when we can have larger groups and kind of have a barbecue or celebration, what they've accomplished, and combine that with their service award. So hopefully we'll let you know when that happens too. So.
Great, and that's one thing that's critical. We have a lot of great folks who work for the city, and we all know that, but we need to make sure that they know that as well and thank them for it. So, seeing nothing else on agenda. I guess we'll see you guys Thursday. Meeting adjourned.
I had already sent Maria a note and said, what's the number to get into the